All right, ready to dive into some seriously thought-provoking stuff today. We're tackling the psychology of evil. You sent over these fascinating excerpts from Philip Zimbardo's The Lucifer Effect.
It's definitely a book that makes you think. It really challenges how we view good and evil, like how much our situations shape us.
And that's exactly what we're exploring today. How do regular people end up doing awful things? We'll dig into the research, real-world examples, and of course tap into your expertise to shed some light on all this.
Exactly. And it's important to emphasize we're not trying to justify these actions. We're trying to understand, like, what circumstances, what choices lead down this dark path.
Makes sense. So let's start with probably the most well-known,
Yeah.
the Stanford Prison Experiment, or SPE. Zimbardo's study, it really shook things up. Just imagine Stanford students randomly assigned as guards or prisoners in this mock prison.
The idea was to look at, the effects of authority, identity, power in a controlled setting. But it took a really unexpected turn. It was supposed to run for 2 weeks, but they had to stop it after 6 days.
Wow, 6 days. Why such a sudden halt?
Things escalated quickly. The guards became abusive. The prisoners were seriously distressed. Continuing would have been, well, dangerous. No one expected it to get so intense.
So what exactly were these guards doing that led to the shutdown?
Oh, they implemented these harsh routines, waking prisoners up in the middle of the night for counts, making them clean toilets with their bare hands. They used psychological tactics to break them down. I mean, we're talking college students doing things that, to many, would seem downright cruel.
Cleaning toilets with their bare hands, that's hard to hear. So were these students just cruel to begin with? Or was there something else transforming them?
See, that's what's so fascinating about the SPE. These guards, they were given minimal instructions, put in uniforms that, projected authority, and they quickly adopted this authoritarian behavior. The environment, the power they perceived, it influenced them in ways they probably never imagined.
So the situation itself had that much power.
Exactly. Plus, the anonymity of the uniforms added to it reduced their accountability. It created a disconnect between their actions and who they saw themselves as.
Like a mob mentality almost. They lose their inhibitions and act in ways they never would otherwise. What about the prisoners? How did they handle all of this?
It was traumatic for them. They were stripped of their identities, always watched, no freedom. Some had complete breakdowns. One prisoner, they called him 8612, he had a total mental collapse, screaming, demanding to be let out. Another one, he went on a hunger strike, just desperate for some control.
That hunger strike, it reminds me of learned helplessness, right? Can you explain that a bit more,
Sure.
how it fits into all this?
Of course, learned helplessness, it's that state where after repeated bad experiences you can't control, you just give up. You believe nothing you do matters. Even when change or escape is possible, you stay passive, resigned, like you have no power.
So someone's stuck in a job they hate, right? They might try to change things at first, but after setbacks, they give up, even when opportunities come up. That feeling of being powerless, stuck, that's learned helplessness.
Precisely. And in the SPE, the prisoners, they were constantly degraded, felt trapped. The guards' actions, the whole environment, it reinforced their hopelessness, contributed to their psychological suffering.
It's really scary how strong situations can be, like overriding personality, values, everything. Does this mean we're all just ticking time bombs, waiting for the right or wrong situation to turn us bad?
Not necessarily. While the SPE shows how strong circumstances are, it doesn't mean we're all doomed to be evil. We have choices, the ability to choose how we respond, even under pressure.
That's a relief. But how do we square that with what happened in the SBE?
As we delve deeper into this, we'll find research and examples showing how much individual choice matters, the power of resistance, the potential for good even in darkness. But let's move beyond Stanford. Zimbardo mentions other studies showing similar patterns like conformity and obedience.
Right, Salamash's conformity experiments come to mind. Participants giving wrong answers, even though they knew better, just to fit in with the group.
Ash's work shows how persuasive social pressure is. Even with simple tasks, judging line lengths, people doubted themselves when faced with a group giving the wrong answer, even if it was obviously wrong. The fear of standing out, being different, it can make us doubt even clear truths.
It's wild that people would conform so readily, especially when the answer is obvious. So are we all just sheep, blindly following? What's the bigger picture here with this conformity?
It goes deep. It highlights our need to belong, to be accepted. We're social creatures. The fear of being alone is incredibly strong. It makes us question ourselves just to fit in.
It's more than following the crowd. It's about that deep need to belong, to avoid being the odd one out. This makes me think of Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments. Controversial, but powerful.
Ah, yes, the shock experiments. They sparked so much debate but gave us a glimpse into obedience to authority. It's unsettling.
Refresh my memory. What are those studies all about?
Participants thought they were giving electric shocks to someone, a learner who got answers wrong. The shocks weren't real, but the learner had pre-recorded responses, getting more and more distressed as the experiment went on.
And the disturbing part
A
is,
surprisingly high percentage of people kept giving shocks, even when they were clearly worried, even when they thought they were causing real pain, all because the experimenter told them to.
it's chilling to think average people would inflict pain just because someone in authority told them to. Do these findings apply to real-world situations? Could they help us understand, say, the Holocaust?
Absolutely. Milgram's research shows how obedience to authority can outweigh personal morals. It's not about being inherently cruel, it's about the situation's power dynamics. His work helps explain how people, even those who disagree, can take part in horrible acts when they see the person giving orders as legitimate authority.
It's a sobering thought. Reinforces the idea that evil isn't always about evil people. Sometimes it's the system, the authority, the situation itself that creates the conditions for good people to do horrific things.
Precisely. And as we'll see, dehumanization adds another layer to this, making cruelty even easier. It's the process of stripping away someone's human qualities.
Let's get into that.
Oh.
What exactly is dehumanization? How does it make people more willing to hurt others?
Dehumanization is basically stripping people or groups of their humanness. It's reducing them to objects, things, even vermin. Empathy and moral concern disappear. It creates this distance so people can disconnect from the suffering they inflict.
Like a mental barrier, a way to justify treating someone inhumanely because you've convinced yourself they're less than human. Are there any historical examples of this?
Unfortunately, there are tons. The Rwandan genocide, where Hutus were told Tutsis were cockroaches, or using racial slurs and propaganda during war to dehumanize the enemy. Throughout history, it's been used to justify violence and oppression. And sadly, it was also present in the Stanford Prison Experiment.
How so? These are college students, not genocidal dictators.
True, but even in that fake prison, dehumanization took root. The guards started seeing the prisoners as less than human, calling them by numbers, making them wear humiliating clothes, forcing them to do degrading tasks. That erosion of human dignity made it easier for the guards to abuse them.
It's a recurring pattern. A chilling reminder of how easy it is to forget someone's humanity, especially when external factors come into play. But it's not just individual bad actors, is it? Zimbardo argues that systems themselves can create environments that foster evil. He talks about the shift from bad apples to bad barrels. Can we unpack that?
The bad apples idea only focuses on the individuals, blaming specific people, but it ignores how much systems influence things. It's too narrow a view.
So instead of obsessing over the bad apples, we need to look at the barrel itself.
Yeah.
The system that might be creating the problem, the environment, the rules, the culture. All of it shapes behavior, right?
Exactly. The Abu Ghraib prison scandal is a prime example.
Oh, yeah, those photos were horrific. American soldiers abusing Iraqi prisoners.
Yeah.
Like a real-life Stanford Prison Experiment.
The parallels are definitely there. Abu Ghraib was a bad barrel. Chaos, poor training, bad leadership, intense pressure, and blurred lines between military and civilian personnel. It all combined to create an environment where abuse was likely.
So it wasn't just a handful of rogue soldiers acting on their own.
Individuals are responsible for their actions, but the way things were at Abu Ghraib, those systemic breakdowns made abuse much more likely. It's important to see how systems can set the stage for evil, even if individuals aren't necessarily bad to begin with.
It shows we need to do more than punish individuals. We need to fix the larger issues that contribute to the problem. Otherwise, it'll happen again.
Absolutely. Zimbardo's book brings up other examples of systemic abuse too, like those strip search phone call scams. Familiar with those?
Vaguely. Remind me what happened.
Basically, these scammers pretended to be cops, tricked fast food managers into strip-searching employees based on totally made-up accusations. They exploited the power dynamics of the workplace, preyed on people's tendency to obey authority figures.
It's scary how easily people fell for those scams. Weren't there cases where it even escalated to physical abuse?
Yes, unfortunately, some did. And what's even more disturbing is that some managers who carried out the strip searches got in legal trouble, but the scammers who manipulated them often got away with it. That discrepancy shows how hard it is to assign blame when obedience to authority is twisted and exploited through deception.
So bad barrels aren't just physical places. Systems of authority and societal expectations can create conditions ripe for abuse too.
Exactly. Another example of this is how the military's SEER program, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, was misused in
I
interrogations.
haven't heard of that one. Tell me more.
SEER training teaches soldiers how to handle being captured, how to resist interrogation tactics used by the enemy. But some techniques used in SEER training, things like sleep deprivation, stress positions, psychological manipulation, they were adapted and used in interrogations at places like Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib.
So techniques designed to help soldiers resist torture were twisted and used as torture. That's a pretty disturbing paradox.
It is. It shows how methods developed for one purpose can be easily perverted, especially when ethical lines blur and there isn't enough oversight.
Wow, we've covered some dark territory today. The influence of situations, the weight of authority, the dangers of dehumanization, and how systems can become bad barrels. It's all pretty bleak. Is there any hope? Can we resist the Lucifer effect? Can we stay decent even when surrounded by these powerful forces?
Absolutely. Zimbardo's book doesn't just focus on the problem, he also explores ways to resist, ways to protect our better nature.
That's good to hear. Tell me more. What can we do to stay true to ourselves in a world that sometimes feels designed to corrupt us?
Zimbardo says recognizing how situations influence us is key, understanding that we're all vulnerable, and equipping ourselves with strategies to resist. He talks about developing self-awareness, critical thinking skills, embracing moral courage, and fostering personal responsibility.
So it's not about being superhumanly good, but about acknowledging what can influence us and being prepared to counter it.
Exactly. Welcome back. Let's pick up where we left off, exploring those strategies that help us, well, stay good even when surrounded by those bad barrels.
Right, you mentioned time perspective before the break. I'm really curious about that. How does our perception of time, like past, present, future, affect our ability to resist negative influences?
It's about understanding how we see time and how that shapes our choices. We each navigate life through different time frames.
I get that we all experience time differently, but I'm not quite seeing the connection to resisting evil. Can you unpack that a bit?
Zimbardo argues that people who are overly focused on the present moment, they're more prone to impulsive behavior. They're more easily tempted by immediate gratification, even if it leads to bad outcomes.
Like the marshmallow experiment. The kids who could wait for the bigger reward later, they did better in life. Thinking about future consequences shaped their decisions.
Exactly. A balanced view of time, one that considers the long-term impact of our actions, can protect us from making choices that feel good now but have negative repercussions later. It's about expanding our vision beyond the immediate.
So if we train ourselves to think beyond the present, we're less likely to be swayed by those in-the-moment pressures, those situational forces that might lead us toward unethical behavior.
Precisely. And mindfulness plays a crucial role in developing that broader perspective.
Mindfulness. It's such a buzzword these days. What does it actually mean in this context?
Mindfulness is basically paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It's about being aware of our thoughts, emotions, what we're physically feeling, and our surroundings. It's about being present.
So it's like heightened awareness, but more than that.
Yes, it's more than just being aware. It's about observing those things without being overwhelmed by them, without automatically reacting. It creates space for making conscious choices.
Okay, that's interesting. So how does mindfulness actually help us resist negative influences?
By practicing mindfulness, we put space between a stimulus and our response. We become less reactive, less impulsive, and more deliberate in our actions. We gain the ability to pause, reflect, and choose a more thoughtful path.
So instead of just reacting to a situation, we take a breath, observe, assess, and respond with more intention. That sounds like a pretty useful skill.
It is. Mindfulness can help us recognize when we're being manipulated or pressured, giving us the chance to choose a different course of action. It's about taking back control of our responses.
Sounds like a superpower.
Hmm.
But how do we actually cultivate mindfulness? Is this something we can learn?
Practices like meditation and yoga can be really helpful for developing mindfulness, but it's also about integrating mindful moments into everyday life. It's about finding opportunities to practice presence.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, imagine you get a stressful email that makes you angry. Instead of immediately firing back a response, take a few deep breaths, notice how your body feels, and just observe your thoughts and emotions without judging them. That pause allows you to respond with more clarity and calmness.
So it's creating that buffer between the trigger and our reaction, letting us choose a better response. Can we practice mindfulness even with ordinary activities?
Absolutely. Even simple things like walking, eating, or taking a shower can become opportunities for mindfulness. The key is to gently redirect your attention to the present moment, to what you're experiencing, without judgment or analysis. It's about savoring the experience, being fully present in the here and now.
I'm starting to see how powerful this could be for navigating life's complexities, especially those tough situations. So we've got time, perspective, and mindfulness as tools for staying true to our values. Any others we can add to our arsenal?
Zimbardo also talks about the importance of heroic imagination.
Heroic imagination. Now that's intriguing. Tell me more.
It's about developing the ability to imagine ourselves acting heroically in difficult situations, mentally rehearsing for those moments when our values are put to the test.
Like visualizing ourselves as the heroes in our own stories.
Kind of, but it's not about fantasizing about superhuman feats. It's about recognizing that heroic action is possible for anyone, that we all have the capacity for courage when we need it.
So if we practice heroic actions in our minds, we're more likely to act according to our values when we face real-life challenges.
Yep.
It's like mentally preparing ourselves to do the right thing, even when it's hard.
Exactly. Heroic imagination boosts our confidence and prepares us to respond in ways that align with our deepest convictions, even under pressure. We train our minds to choose courage over fear, integrity over taking the easy way out.
Like a form of mental preparation for ethical action. Are there ways to build our heroic imagination to strengthen that inner resource?
Definitely. Surrounding ourselves with stories of heroism can be incredibly powerful. Reading about courageous individuals, watching films that depict bravery, reflecting on times we've seen or done something kind or morally strong, those all feed our heroic imagination.
So immersing ourselves in positive examples, reminding ourselves that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. It's about cultivating hope and inspiration.
Precisely. By filling our minds with stories of courage, we nourish our own capacity for courageous action. We remind ourselves that heroism isn't some mythical quality, but a human potential we all have within us.
This is starting to make sense.
Hmm.
We're not just passive recipients of our circumstances. We can shape our responses, resist negative influences, even act heroically when the situation calls for it.
Exactly. And that's the empowering message at the heart of Zimbardo's work. Fighting evil isn't just about avoiding bad barrels, it's also about developing our inner strength, building resilience, and nurturing our capacity for good. It's about recognizing that we have a choice.
We started by looking at how situations can turn well-intentioned people into perpetrators of evil. Now we're exploring the flip side, how people can resist those forces and even become beacons of light, forces for good in the world.
It's a dynamic interplay between the person and the situation. We can't always control the circumstances we're in, but we can control how we choose to respond. We have agency.
So it's not about striving for some impossible standard of perfection, but about making the most ethical choices we can, even when facing difficult or murky situations. It's about aligning our actions with our values.
Precisely, and that's where personal responsibility becomes so important. It's about owning our choices, even the tough ones, and understanding the impact we have on the world.
We talked about personal responsibility earlier. Can we dig a little deeper? What does taking personal responsibility actually look like in practice?
It means acknowledging our power to choose our actions, even when we feel pressured by external forces. It means recognizing that we're responsible for the consequences of our choices, the intended and unintended ones.
No more blaming the situation or hiding behind, I was just following orders.
Right. Taking personal responsibility means being honest with ourselves, confronting our mistakes, and making things right when we've hurt someone. It's about living with integrity.
But what about situations where we feel stuck, like all our options are bad?
Even then, we still have choices. We can choose to resist, to speak up, to find creative solutions, or to get support from others. Doing nothing is a choice too.
So it's about being proactive, even when circumstances feel overwhelming, even when it seems like we're fighting an uphill battle.
Exactly. And that's where courage is so crucial. It's the fuel that allows us to act according to our values, even when it's scary.
Courage seems rare these days. Can anyone develop courage, or is it just for a select few?
I believe courage is a human capacity, not a special gift for some. It's not about not feeling fear, it's about acting despite fear. It's about choosing to do what's right even when fear is whispering doubts in our ear.
So it's not about being fearless, but about doing what's right even when we're afraid.
Yes, and like any skill, courage can be developed through practice and intention. It gets stronger every time we face our fears and do what's right.
So how do we start cultivating courage? Any tips?
Start by noticing the small acts of courage you already do in everyday life. Speaking up when someone says something prejudiced, helping someone in need, or just standing by your convictions even when they're not popular, those are all forms of courage. Recognize them, appreciate them, and let them motivate you to be even more courageous.
So courage isn't reserved for grand, heroic acts. It's something we can practice in our daily lives, building our capacity for bravery one step at a time.
Exactly. And those seemingly small acts of courage add up. They strengthen our resolve and prepare us for bigger challenges down the road.
This is really coming together. We're not just shaped by our circumstances. We can actively shape our responses, resist negativity, and even act heroically when the moment calls for it.
Precisely. That's the empowering message at the core of Zimbardo's work. The fight against evil isn't just about avoiding bad barrels, it's about cultivating inner strength, resilience, and nurturing our capacity for good. It's about recognizing that we have a choice.
We've spent a lot of time looking at the darker side of human nature, how situations can push us towards doing bad things. But I want to shift gears a bit. You mentioned something that might seem kind of contradictory when we're talking about evil, the importance of celebrating heroes.
It might seem counterintuitive, but focusing on the positive, on people who exemplify courage, compassion, integrity, it can be incredibly powerful. It inspires us, individually and as a society, to strive to be better.
Like a counterbalance to all the negativity we're bombarded with every day,
Yeah.
right? Reminding us that goodness isn't just a fairy tale, it's real.
Exactly. Celebrating heroes reinforces the idea that good can win, that ordinary people can create extraordinary change, and that we all have the potential for greatness. It's about cultivating hope.
So it's not just about dissecting evil, but also about finding inspiration from those who represent its opposites.
Exactly. And heroism isn't limited to big historical figures or celebrities. It exists in everyday life, those small acts of kindness and courage that often go unnoticed, like a teacher who goes above and beyond for their students, or a neighbor who's always willing to lend a hand, or a friend who offers unwavering support when you're going through tough times.
Exactly. Heroism takes many forms, and recognizing and celebrating those everyday acts is crucial. It's about shifting our focus as a society from the problem of evil to the possibility of good.
It's about actively seeking out and highlighting those stories that remind us of our shared humanity, our capacity for kindness, and our ability to make the world a better place.
Yes, and that change in perspective, that conscious choice to focus on the good, can be incredibly empowering. It fuels our desire to resist negativity and to contribute to a more humane and compassionate world.
Okay, I'm convinced. We need to highlight these everyday heroes.
Hmm.
But how do we do that? Do we need statues and parades?
Celebrating heroes doesn't have to be grandiose. It can be as simple as thanking someone who's made a positive impact on your life, or sharing stories of inspiring people, or supporting organizations that champion heroic values. So it's about making heroism a part of our daily lives, making it visible, talking about it, and recognizing the ripple effect of even the smallest acts of kindness and courage.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that each of us has the potential for heroism, that we can all choose to embody those values that uplift and inspire, that contribute to creating a world where good triumphs.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've delved into the dark side of human nature, explored how situational forces shape our behavior, the dangers of conformity and blind obedience, and the importance of resisting the Lucifer effect.
We've also examined strategies for protecting our better nature, for cultivating resilience, courage, and compassion, even in the face of adversity.
And we've arrived at a hopeful realization. We're not powerless. We have choices. We can resist negativity. We can choose to be forces for good.
Absolutely. And that choice, that unwavering commitment to goodness, is what will ultimately define us, individually and as a species. It's what will determine the future of our world.
As we wrap up, what are the key takeaways you hope our listeners will reflect on? What wisdom would you like them to carry with them as they navigate the complexities of life?
I think these 10 points are worth pondering. First, situational forces are powerful, but they don't control our fate. We have the ability to choose how we respond, to resist negativity, and to act heroically, even when things are tough. Second, evil isn't something that only certain people possess. It emerges from a complex interaction between individuals and their environment. By understanding what contributes to its emergence, we can develop strategies to prevent and resist it. Third, dehumanization is a dangerous process that makes cruelty and violence more likely. We need to consciously cultivate empathy, compassion, and respect for the inherent dignity of every human being. Fourth, systems and structures can create environments where abuse can thrive. We have a responsibility to challenge unjust systems and to advocate for a world that is more just and equitable for everyone. Fifth, conformity and obedience are strong forces, but we can always resist them. By developing self-awareness, critical thinking skills, and moral courage, we can resist pressure to conform and stand up for what we believe in. Sixth, personal responsibility is crucial. We're accountable for our choices and our actions, no matter the circumstances. Admitting our mistakes and making things right when we've hurt someone is part of living with integrity. Seventh, heroic action is possible. It's a potential that exists within all of us. By practicing mindfulness, having a balanced perspective on time, and using our heroic imagination, we can prepare ourselves to meet life's challenges with courage and compassion. Eighth, celebrating heroes, both big and small, inspires us and others to act heroically. By recognizing and honoring acts of courage, kindness, and integrity, we create a culture that values and supports good. Ninth, we're not just passive bystanders in this thing called life. We're active participants who can shape the story, contribute to positive change, and make the world a more compassionate place. And finally, the fight for good is ongoing. It takes endurance, commitment, and a belief that we can create a better world together. Don't underestimate the power of your choices, no matter how small they may seem.
Those are powerful insights. A reminder that we have the power to choose good over evil, to resist darkness, and to be the heroes of our own lives. Thank you for joining us on this exploration.
And thank you for your insightful questions and for such an engaging conversation. Remember, the pursuit of good is a journey. Let's all play our part in building a world where kindness, courage, and compassion guide our way.
Until next time, keep those minds engaged and those hearts open to the possibilities within us and all around us.